you just introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Gary Kidgell. I'm the librarian here within the Alex Johnson Library. I'm also a professional esoteric astrologer and a writer and speaker on esoteric matters.
That's great, thank you. And can you tell us a little bit about this library here as well?
For sure. The Alex Johnson Library at present houses around 4,000 books on a vast range of spiritual and esoteric subjects. Next door we have a study room which holds around 400 journals, again mainly esoteric, many pamphlets on spiritual and esoteric matters, and this is designed to function as a spiritual resource where people can come, use it as a reference library and learn more about these various subjects.
Brilliant, yeah. So I'm doing a project on the soul. I'm trying to understand a bit more what the soul is.
Yep.
Do you think you could try and explain that?
I can explain it in the light of the wisdom teachings or ancient wisdom, which theosophy is an aspect of. So I will be using that particular paradigm, which in my opinion is as good as any.
Yeah, and is that like Western, or it's like it's an adopted Western from Eastern?
Well, theosophists would say that the timeless truths found within their teachings underlie all spiritual and esoteric practices, and the world's religions are various attempts to express these in accordance with the particular period in time, the particular culture from which they arose. Although theosophy basically has an Eastern paradigm,
yeah,
which probably equates closest to the Indian or Hindu teachings.
From the Upanishads, and is it?
Well, the Indian teachings, I mean, there's a whole range of systems. Theosophy is probably closest to Advaita Vedanta, which is basically, well, these teachings were elaborated by Adi Shankara, 6th century sage. And yes, the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Brahma Sutras are the principal teachings, yeah.
Yeah. And then, so would some of the other, because you included theosophy in the paradigm that you're talking from, but are other parts of what the paradigm, like Eastern or Western, or is it hard to distinguish where
it's primarily derived from Eastern teachings? There are a lot of Sanskrit and Tibetan terms used in theosophy, particularly Sanskrit, but it's a very good paradigm. In my opinion, it can serve to regenerate our modern religion, our world religion, and provide an advance point for scientific study, as well as contemporary psychology.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I went off on one there
That's
about
okay.
where it comes from. But yeah, that would be great if you could try and reveal some light on what the soul is.
Well, the first thing to bear in mind is that the soul is formless, the soul itself. The wisdom teachings commonly symbolize it as a lotus-like structure, seeking to unfold various layers of petals.
Okay.
We say these relate to knowledge, love, and sacrifice. It takes many lives for the soul to realize its intent on earth, to unfold these symbolic petals. We use the symbolic number of 777, and we say 700 lives to unfold primarily the knowledge petals, learning everything about our world. 70 lives to unfold the love petals. And then the last 7 lives relate to the sacrifice petals, where a spiritually advanced individual basically commits acts of extreme self-sacrifice for the benefit of humanity and the planet itself and the whole evolutionary intent.
All right. So is that within is that in reincarnation? So
Yes,
within
so
one,
in terms of
so
lives,
one
yes.
soul goes through 700 and
I mean, that's a symbolic number, and it can vary with each particular soul. When one becomes aware of the spiritual path, one can fast track the evolutionary process.
Okay.
Basically, but I mean, there's nothing elitist about this. It's like flowers unfolding at different times in a garden, but it's probably self-evident at the moment that of the billions of souls in incarnation in human bodies, they're at different stages of evolutionary development in terms of how they express spiritual qualities, or perhaps you might say if they express spiritual qualities. But initially the soul simply wants its personality to explore the outer world. This is done through the factor of desire. And we talk of four principal desires: the desire to be recognized in the world, the desire for new experience, the desire for emotional response, and the desire for security, be this financial or more emotional security through others. But it's right for the soul, the young soul, involving to get more and more involved with the material world. But eventually the soul reaches a saturation point, and then the personality which it has adopted at that time experiences what we call divine unrest, where what's going on out there is no longer enough. It doesn't satisfy them, doesn't sustain them. That one is then effectively called back to the source of one's being, and that is when the spiritual path beckons. And what is almost like a battle between soul and personality occurs, because when one is called onto the spiritual path, one's life as a personality gets harder. The soul seeks to dispense with the karma that has accumulated over many lives. The soul tests the personality in various situations in life to ascertain its worthiness as a spiritual instrument of expression. But Madame Blavatsky used the analogy of the soul as a potter moulding the clay of the personality into an urn, of a spiritual receptacle on the symbolic wheel of rebirth. And that's a very good analogy, and we are moulded by our various experiences. We always have free will to choose where we want to go, what we want to do in life. But eventually, when we are aligned to the intent of the soul, free will becomes meaningless, because we then seek to express the intent of the soul.
Okay, and so you said there through desire. Is that through the soul's desire?
Well, the soul has a thirst for incarnation as part of its evolutionary intent. Well, that is its purpose. But humans experience desire, and the main reason is because the soul is wanting humans initially to become more involved with the material world. The soul wants to experience all that life on the lower planes of consciousness has to offer. But when one is called back, when one is aware of the spiritual path, desire must be overcome. It is transmuted into higher things, spiritual aspiration. Selfish or jealous love should become unconditional and inclusive love. Fear should become courage, and so on. It's the solar plexus chakra, which is emotionally driven, astral plane, should be transmuted into the qualities of the heart chakra. Desire is healthy for a young soul, but for an advanced soul it's not. Desire causes all the problems, of course, amongst humans, and a lot of conflict and so on.
Yeah, my understanding what you're talking about transmuting there, I've read about alchemical practices, and I'm very much interested.
Sure, yeah.
But so what you're talking about there, when you're saying like transcending desire, would that be to integrate, so to come away from dualities to integrate into oneness, or is that?
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. I mean, as you probably know, Carl Jung was fascinated by alchemy. He developed an interest in this after his friend Richard Wilhelm gave him a copy of The Secret of the Golden Flower, which is really the Chinese version of alchemy. And he quickly realized the alchemists were talking in symbols, describing what he described as individuation, unification. Well, in terms of the wisdom teachings, it's unification of soul and personality, but it involves, as Jung and the alchemists emphasize, the resolution of all opposites. That is the sacred marriage, the conjunctio of the alchemists. But there are these different stages in alchemy, and they are basically depicting what Robert Assagioli described as psychosynthesis, where the existing personality, with its various attachments, desires, complexes, and so on, is broken down, deconstructed, and reassembled at a higher point of consciousness, where the soul can infuse it with its energies. The alchemists had the motto solve et coagula, solve relating to the dissolution and the coagulation at a higher point of consciousness.
So is that work of the soul as well then, would you say?
Absolutely. Well, the alchemists depicted the soul as the elusive philosopher's stone. But it's basically describing how the personality seeks to align itself with the intent of the soul. And that is why we are here, ultimately.
Okay, so to identify, is that more consciously identified with the soul? Like,
yes, it's a two-way process. I mean, the soul will seek to contact us through dreams if we meditate, through what Jung called synchronicities, where there's a concurrence between what's going on here and in here subjectively and what happens in the objective world. But the soul's always seeking to draw us towards it, but we should make efforts to connect with the soul. Esoteric teachings effectively say that for every step we take towards the soul, it will take two towards us. But it's a challenging process. The soul tests us, and we have this pool of karma which is accumulated over our many previous lives. Some of the karma is favourable. When we experience favourable karma, we should then give out the rewards to others in service. When it's difficult, service helps to alleviate it.
Okay, so what part is the soul? I've read a lot about the spirit and the soul and the mental planes. And like, how do we distinguish what the soul
in terms of the wisdom teachings, in essence, we are spirit, what Theosophy calls monads, part of a great solar consciousness. And for that great consciousness to evolve, it projects us, the component parts, down into matter, so we can be something more than we were hitherto. We can unfold latent spiritual qualities. It is this testing within the crucible of matter that this occurs. Now, our spirit vibrates at a very high frequency. It cannot come down into matter itself. It adopts structures or mechanisms which can function on the levels of consciousness or planes of consciousness below. So we say that the soul or higher self is a reflection of our spirit, the monad. And the soul itself cannot come down to physical level. It adopts a personality comprised of a body, emotions and mind, or physical, astral and mental bodies. That the personality is the physical, emotional and mental bodies combined.
Okay, that's okay. I'll try and
you can take time with it. It takes time. Yeah.
So the soul is not here.
It's within us. Yes.
So is it in our inner world?
Yeah.
And how does it relate to the outer world, like the physical, as within, so without?
When we express qualities relating to the soul, such as unconditional love, compassion, empathy, peace, when we can discriminate between what is real and unreal, i.e. what is transient and what is spiritual, when we can think in abstract ways, we contribute to the evolution of the soul. When we persist in our spiritual endeavours, regardless of the challenges. These are These are all stored in the cosmic bank of the soul, and we carry these on through this life and into future ones. Whereas when we express ourselves as selfish personalities, shall we say, that is stored up as karma, which is worked off later.
Okay, so the soul is how does this relate? Like, say, my individual soul.
Yeah.
How is that connected to the solar?
Yeah. Good
soul?
question. No. The solar being relates to our spirit. We're all part of that as spirits or monads. There's also a great consciousness operating through our planet. We call it the planetary logos, who's a chakra within the solar logos. There's the esoteric proposition that all things live within the body of a greater being. And the souls of humanity are all part of this planetary consciousness. And that is what we mean when we say my soul and your soul are the same. They have a different evolutionary history, but they're part of this greater consciousness. And therefore, whilst your soul is incarnated through you with a particular purpose, mine has incarnated through me with a particular purpose. Mm. But whilst the purposes may be different in terms of individual soul evolution, they both relate to the evolution of the planetary consciousness.
Okay.
So, I mean, all humans have souls that are part of this planetary logos, a planetary consciousness.
I've read the Kabbalah that all. I mean, sorry, I'm just trying to.
That's okay.
Like relate it to my understanding of things here. So, would you say then that your soul and like your individual soul and the all conscious? You said consciousness there. Is it consciousness? The soul, is it a part of consciousness?
Well, consciousness relates to the interplay between spirit and matter. So the soul is the factor that links them. So consciousness, describing consciousness as the soul, that's a good question, because you would have to be at a certain, or the individual would have to be at a certain stage of evolution to express the soul and its qualities. But consciousness really arises through the soul taking on a body. So in that respect, yes. Because
my experience of like expansion in awareness and consciousness, you know, it's definitely gone through some stages of like you know, being aware of, you know, your emotions, being aware of your body, being aware of your thoughts, and then once you're aware of your thoughts, you get to this point where you're like, well, if I'm observing my thoughts, then who am I? And then you sort of
absolutely. I mean, that is a well-known what we call disidentification exercise, being aware that we are not the physical body, we are not the emotions, we are not the mind. We identify with the soul, and by that way we adopt the role of the soul or the observer, whereas the personality is the observed. We become aware that the personality is an instrument of the soul, and that is why we have a physical body, emotions and mind. And basically it's about the physical body, the emotions and mind functioning as one, so we can serve as an effective spiritual instrument.
Okay, so what part is the soul then? So if it's moving through, if you're moving your consciousness and zooming out of identification, I guess, of the body, and you're zooming out of self, like in terms of ego, I guess Jung would say, and you're connecting more to your soul, but how, I guess, sorry, I'm just trying to work out.
No, that's all right.
So consciousness is the awareness, but is it also the soul, or is the soul?
No, it's
separate?
It's separate. The soul results. Sorry, consciousness for us is a result of the soul incarnating, taking on a personality. But individual consciousness can be, well, a lot of people are primarily centered at the emotional level, where the emotions drive the mind, what Indian teachings call karma manas, or mind contaminated by desire. Others, particularly scientists, etc., are very focused within the mind, the lower mind, the mental body. But people who are well advanced on the spiritual path, they are becoming identified with the soul and seeking to function as the soul's instrument, to effectively function as a soul.
So how do you, how do I say this? Sorry. Like, so the soul, you know, the more you zoom out of like identification, it's hard. Where do you rest in terms of this is my individual soul? Because could you not zoom out again and realize that, but we're all, like, everything is that sacred consciousness?
Well, yes, because ultimately everything here is an expression of one great life. And people who are very spiritually advanced, what theosophy would call masters, etc., that is how they perceive the world. I'm talking about it now intellectually, but I mean, well, certain teachings have used the term God consciousness, you know, because basically they just see everything as a manifestation of the divine. And they do that, of course, not by identifying with the form, but the life within it. You know, it's like me looking at you. Am I looking at you as Dawn Berry? You know, or am I looking at you as a soul expressing it through Dawn Berry? Or beyond that, am I just seeing you as an expression of one great divine life, as is everything else in creation? That would depend on my level of consciousness.
Or maybe I'm a reflection of your inner experience.
Well, psychologically, of course, because there's a relationship between the inner and the outer, absolutely.
Yeah, I find that as well, that's quite difficult to grasp as well when we think about, you know, the outer world as a reflection of the inner world, and the way...
Well, it's a reflection of our inner psyche.
Yeah,
to the individual psyche, yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of like what reality is, like reality, my understanding is that it must be, my reality is different than your reality.
Yes.
Because, you know, but then when
ultimately, it's the same reality, but yes, your reality is different to mine.
So, yeah, like through perspectives, I guess,
yes.
And meaning making and all those things, and the journey that our soul's on, as well as...
And our experiences through life colour the psyche, and your inner reality will be different to mine. If your soul's communicating to you, it's not going to use the same symbols as my soul communicating to me, because our life experiences are different. What we have studied, the imagery, it's all different.
Yeah.
Because the soul will use what we've experienced out there, what we've contemplated upon, to offer us intent and meaning, to make us more whole ultimately.
So how do we connect our soul, like how do we see past the illusionary sort of how do souls connect and speak to each other, and what you know? So there's individual souls that are all part of the one consciousness. Did you call it earlier?
Yeah, one life.
Yeah. So how?
Which spirit? As spirit, we're all part of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So so spirit is the collective, all the souls
within us, all the spirits within our solar system.
Okay, so
all the souls of humanity are part of the planetary consciousness.
And the planetary consciousness is spirit, is it?
No, that's a chakra within. There's a great being operating through our planet, but that's subject to the intent of the higher solar being, which is a part of.
Okay, so
life within life.
So again, is that like inner world, outer world, there might be a whole universe inside me.
Well, there's a universe inside you. There's one inside of me. We are the universe, but it depends on our level of spiritual evolution, how far up the planes of consciousness, how high our realization can be, what our experience is of oneness. But bearing in mind, of course, these things are beyond name and form. You know, I mean, the soul communicates to us through symbols, etc. All these great teachings can only lead us to a certain stage. The actual experience in what in the West we call cosmic consciousness is beyond any name and form. The samadhi of the Hindus, the satori of Zen, the nirvana of Buddhists, etc. And getting back to the soul thing, I mean, we can only try and understand the workings of the soul in terms of what we understand about life. I mean, I often use the analogy of the souls moving the personalities about like pieces on a chessboard. And maybe like your soul has drawn you here today to have a conversation about this. You know, but I'm trying to describe a realm which is formless.
Of course. It's so difficult, isn't it? It's really... this is really helpful.
But, I mean, Jung basically, well, in terms of theosophy, the archetypes or divine ideas are the solar intent. And archetypes are represented within our psyche as symbols. So what he's basically saying is the soul speaks to us through symbolic language. That is the language of the soul. And we must find ways to understand that and interpret it.
That's interesting, because that's why I'm interested in this. Really, there's so much of my experience that is abstract and comes, you know, even when people say, you know, they talk about feelings, for example, like, you know, people might just say, oh, I'm sad. And I'm like, but what is sad? Like, how can you, like, when you put a word to something like that, it's like, how can I possibly understand if I understand, you know, when you say that, do I understand it the same way as you express it?
And also,
you know, is it a colour? Is it fast? Is it slow? It's a whole
it's certainly a vibration, yes, which you could, I mean, immediately you think, well, there's a colour, there's a particular frequency to that. And again, it raises the question, what part of you is sad?
Yeah, exactly.
The emotions, which is colouring the mind. Is the soul sad? That's a different... proposition.
So are these different parts of self expressions of the soul? Physical expressions of the soul, emotional expressions of the soul?
Well, the soul, yes they are, but it really takes a process of spiritual refinement to render them as effective expressions of the soul in terms of the soul expressing its evolutionary intent. Yes, I agree with you in a way, because a young soul, I'm not saying I'm not that, but someone who's really expressing rampant desires, that is an expression of the soul, but it's not a particularly high expression of the soul in terms of the evolutionary spiral.
Okay. So...
I mean, Jesus Christ was a very high expression of the soul, if you want.
Yeah.
So was obviously the Buddha, Shankara, and so on. Yeah.
So does it seem like when it's, instead of focusing on individual self, it's more realizing when an individual realizes that they identify with more than just their body, their mind, their emotions, and they start to identify with feeling frequencies and energies outside themselves that they are part of.
Or within themselves.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people, to identify with the soul, a lot of people in meditation will choose a particular object, you know, and that can serve as a conduit, you know, for the soul to communicate or to convey its frequency down into the personality. I mean, I use a 5-pointed star generally towards that, and whether you want to choose a wise old man, a wise old crone, or whatever, you know, if it works, it works.
Okay, so is that when you're trying to focus on the soul?
I would say, yeah, trying to be the soul as such. Try not. My advice would be try not to get the intellect over involved. Just actually feel it.
Okay, so how do we understand like what part, like what? Sorry, this is so. I'm just trying to get a bit more of an understanding of the soul and how that maybe. So we understand how that has a relationship with desire.
No, desire must for the soul. Well, yes, desire enables the young soul to get more involved in the material world, but more advanced souls are in the process of overcoming desire, or they have. And of course, the level where the soul is at, the causal level, if you might wish to say, of our material world, our earth. I mean, we see many people who are clearly inspired at this level, like artists, musicians, scientists, inventors of all sorts, people who make great sacrifice for the benefit of humanity. They attune to that level of those planes of consciousness and express it. That.
So the different planes of consciousness that the soul.
Theosophical writings will say that the soul is spread out effectively over 3 levels: divine will, divine love, wisdom, and abstract thought. And by expressing these, that is how the soul evolves, unfolds its petals.
So by expressing them into physical
reality. When the personality expresses them in the physical world, that's what we're here to do. We're not here to negate matter. You know, we're here to radiate and express spiritual qualities.
So to bring the divine into
physical reality.
Okay, so is there a set journey through these different planes of consciousness, or is there other ways that we can understand?
Our constitution, they're all there, but it's only as we evolve that we experience the higher planes of consciousness.
So are we evolving? So I guess I'm trying to think of the soul as I'm trying to see it as it's separate, to see it what the soul is individually, but it sounds a bit more like that actually it's the thing that it's the thing that is expressing itself through all of the other. Is that right? Like it's expressing itself physically and through mentally and through consciousness.
Well, yes. One way to look at it then, I mean, the soul, according to the wisdom teachings, it evolves through the various kingdoms of nature, mineral, plant, animal, before taking on a human form. I mean, there are different schemes of evolution other than the earth one, but basically everything in an expression of soul, but ultimately everything's an expression of spirit, because soul is the intermediary. But what is important to bear in mind, spiritual development is all about connecting with the soul. The wisdom teachings talk of the Antakarana, or rainbow bridge, between soul and personality. And we strengthen and widen that link through meditation, through expressing spiritual qualities. And eventually that ceases to exist when soul and personality are as one. But all the souls are part of the planetary consciousness. So when we connect with the soul, we share in the energies and powers not only of our own soul, but of the being that's operating through our planet. Does that?
Oh, okay. Sorry, this is
That's okay.
To take in. It's so good. Okay, so the spirit.
Yeah.
Is expressing itself, and in
spirit through soul, soul through personality.
Right, and when personality and soul become one
at a very advanced stage of one's evolution,
through was that cosmic consciousness?
Well, it's through the process of one undertaking spiritual practices and disciplines and serving humanity, very, very important. But the rainbow bridge or Antakarana is the link between soul and personality. In early incarnations, it's just a tenuous thread, but as the soul, through its personalities, develops a stronger contact and the personality becomes more spiritual, the Antakarana strengthens and widens, and eventually it ceases to exist when one is a master or adept, to use theosophical language.
Okay, yeah, and they become one, like...
Yeah, soul and personality is one.
So then can soul and spirit become one, or is that more about...
ultimately, when everything goes back to spirit, then spirit contributes to the evolution of the great solar consciousness, the greater life, which is a part of, because it has gained qualities it did not hitherto possess through all the challenges of incarnation in matter, where its instrument, the soul, uses personalities, to experience the lower world.
Okay, so...
Ultimately, it's all for the development of spirit.
Yeah, for expansion and for it to see itself, to understand itself. Is that right? I mean, when I read the Kabbalion, I it's we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
But my understanding that has resonated most with me is when, like, the beginning, there's this concept that at the beginning was just consciousness, that was just like the all, and it said, what am I? And at that moment it split into dualities, because if it was to identify with being something, it also was other, that it wasn't something. Yeah,
which is like the seal of Solomon, the great being looking down on its reflection.
Yeah. So then the more it said, am I, like, it had to split into, lots of different examples of am I this, 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 which I felt for me was like how, like, individual souls were...
Well, as above, so below. It's happening. So it's like quantum physics with the observer effect. The divine looks upon itself and changes itself when we look upon the divine. It's a two-way process. So
for it to try and manifest in as many possible different expressions,
because the soul wants to
see itself. To understand
itself. The divine wants to see itself reflected in matter, but that's, of course, means all the souls obtaining a high evolutionary state, state of being, then everything is withdrawn, is reabsorbed into the divine, a state of pralaya, then there's another manvantara, or period of manifestation.
Yeah. Okay. So
it's obviously impossible to intellectualize this satisfactorily, because we're dealing with beings whose consciousness, it wouldn't even be accurate to say, comparing, say, my consciousness to an ant, to compare my consciousness to the infinite, we're really dealing with immense levels of consciousness, immense beings, if you wish.
It's very... And it's very abstract, isn't it? We're really trying to comprehend things that are incomprehensible.
Yeah, we are basically, yes.
But through intellect as well. I mean, I get through experience as well. I think that's where my questions have come from, at least. To try and make sense of what's going on and to zoom out of awareness so I can see things more clearly.
The current frontier in human consciousness is abstract thought. That's a bridge between the lower and higher mind, the Antakarana, which we can develop through understanding symbolism and myth, legend, imagery we receive in dreams, meditation, and so on. And of course, studying all this, we are splashing upon the at least the lowest plane of abstract thought rather than the highest plane of the intellect.
Yeah, to me that's what the realm of creativity feels like.
Which is what, true art and music, I don't mean manufactured pop music, obviously, not that there's anything wrong with that per se, but...
that real abstract, trying to really bridge the gap between an inner world and outer world and abstraction and to gain some understanding.
I mean, I think true artists and musicians seek to convey the energies of the divine, or at least the energies of soul, through their work. It shows through their work.
Yeah, to manifest it in physical form.
So then, if they are at that level of consciousness, by producing the work of art, it gives the observer the opportunity to identify with that same level of consciousness.
Yeah, and so much as well, we read about how symbols actually are the thing that speak to our subconscious as well as like superconscious and things. Is that part of like the soul, how the soul communicates as well through symbolism?
Very much so. That in my opinion is the essence of Jung's work. To me, it's a development upon theosophical writings and other religious and spiritual writings. Right. In my humble opinion, that was being, well, it's not that it didn't necessarily exist before, but it was being put out into the public domain, to use modern language to describe that.
Yeah.
And the thing about symbolism, because it's abstract, as Jung said, a symbol can never be drained of its meaning. We can make association after association to enable our consciousness to climb as high as it possibly can through the use of that particular symbol.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I very much resonate with that as well. And I think I was talking to a friend recently about how actually a lot of the times that we try and gain knowledge through books and other people's understanding, and for us to even just talk about this, if someone else is watching and they're like, what are we talking about? Actually, I think the most important thing is to take a question away from it, so you can go on the journey yourself to actually discover something, so you can know it within you. Because like we were saying, that this is like, we can't ever really put into words what we're trying to, it's incomprehensible. So it's more about our actual experience of the soul and the journey that we're on to I guess become more conscious
well, yes, because become more conscious of creation and the various planes of consciousness. When we connect with the soul as well, we are then functioning as a wise being who's had many lives on earth, rather than a transient personality who's, in my case, 63 years of age or whatever. It's a completely different ball game.
Yeah. Thanks. This is so good. Is there anything else that you think we should know about the soul?
Well, I don't know much about it. I think we could go on for the rest of our lives here. Yeah.
Trying to figure it out. Yeah. Well, thanks very much. I'm really glad you
has that been helpful?
That's so helpful. Yeah, and even just being able to talk about it, and it's getting little reflections of what it could be, what it might not be, it's really helpful. I would like to learn more about this divine being though that we're part of, so that I've not come across that before. That you were saying that
it's in my book in quite simple terms.
Great. Where is the book? I bought the book.
Yeah.
I'll put a link to it when
and that should break the hard ground, and then it gives you basically the main paradigm of the wisdom teachings, and then you can see it in various teachings and in life itself. I think, to me, studying life and functioning as a soul is all about being aware of the underlying principles. Always go to the underlying principles for understanding, or if one is lost or confused.
Yeah, and what are they for you, the underlying principles?
The postulates that were given to me: all things live, the divine's projected itself down. Everything is living, all things live within the body of a greater being. We are God to the cells within our body, our moods affect the cells and so on. And we are cells within the planetary being, and so the planetary being wants us to flow with its intent. So we do this through connecting with the soul, and then you have the solar being, a spirit, we are part of that, and it goes on and on.
That's so interesting. Yeah, it's totally different.
So
from my
think about these,
understanding.
then
Yeah.
as above, so below.
Yeah.
There's karma, there's reincarnation,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I think mine foundations are more curiosity, beauty. There's different keys I have to find.
We all do,
expansion.
absolutely.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and I'm
darling.
looking forward to reading through your book now.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I'll pause that there now.